Backstage at America's Got Talent, a young boy named Ethan stood with an old microphone clutched tightly in his small hands. His fingers shook as he held it, not from the weight of the object, but from the weight of the moment. The stage lights leaked through the curtain, casting a glow that made his shadow look even smaller. His clothes were plain, worn at the edges, telling the silent story of a life that had known more struggle than comfort. His eyes, though tired, carried a depth that seemed far older than his years, as if every hardship had etched itself into their gaze. The crowd waited, whispering among themselves. Some looked on with curiosity, others with doubt. To them, Ethan seemed fragile, a boy far too delicate to command a stage as grand as this. The judges leaned back in their seats, their expressions unreadable, their pens ready, expecting perhaps another nervous audition that would pass quietly and be forgotten. But Ethan wasn't there to be forgotten. Beneath his trembling breath was a quiet strength, the kind that came from nights spent alone, dreaming of moments like this. He had no family cheering for him from the audience, no one to catch his eye for reassurance. All he had was the belief that his voice, the one gift life hadn't taken from him, could carry him through. In that stillness before the music began, Ethan stood alone, but with a courage that spoke louder than any words ever could. The music began softly, and Ethan closed his eyes as if shutting out the world. For a moment, the crowd saw only a small, fragile boy standing beneath the weight of bright lights. But then, the first note left his lips, and everything changed. His voice was raw, trembling at first, but filled with an ache so powerful it seemed to reach every corner of the auditorium. It wasn't just singing, it was his heart laid bare. The whispers in the audience faded into silence, replaced by wide eyes and held breaths. Each word he sang carried pieces of his story, loneliness, loss, and the quiet longing for love that had shaped his childhood. His small frame shook with emotion, but his voice soared, filling the space with a haunting beauty no one had expected. By the second verse, people in the audience were already wiping their eyes. Mothers clutched their children's hands a little tighter, strangers leaned forward in their seats, and the judges, who had seen countless auditions, sat frozen in disbelief. Every note seemed to reach into hidden places within people's hearts, stirring emotions they hadn't planned to feel that night. Ethan stood center stage, eyes closed, as if singing not just to the crowd before him but to every soul who had ever felt forgotten. In that moment, he wasn't just a boy without a family, he was a voice for hope, for resilience, for the beauty that can grow even in the darkest places. As Ethan's song carried through the auditorium, something shifted in the atmosphere. The notes weren't just impressive, they were alive, wrapping around every listener like a story only he could tell. The judges exchanged glances, not of skepticism, but of awe. Simon leaned forward, resting his chin on his hand, his eyes narrowing as though he had stumbled upon something rare and unshakably real. The audience, too, felt the weight of the moment. Many had come expecting another performance, but what they were hearing was far beyond talent. It was a confession, a cry for belonging, a melody born from a life of hardship. People who moments ago had doubted him now felt their hearts tightening with empathy. Midway through the song, Ethan's voice cracked, not from weakness, but from truth. That single break in his voice struck deeper than perfection ever could. It was the sound of a child who had endured loneliness but refused to let it silence him. A murmur rippled through the crowd, not of judgment, but of realization. They weren't just listening to a boy sing. They were witnessing a soul pour itself out, unfiltered and unguarded. Even the toughest faces in the room softened. Security guards by the stage fought back tears, producers behind the cameras exchanged knowing looks, and strangers in the audience silently reached for tissues. Ethan had unknowingly united them all, reminding every person present of their own scars, and of the courage it takes to turn pain into something beautiful. When Ethan reached the final note, his voice lingered in the air like a prayer, trembling yet powerful. For a heartbeat, the auditorium froze in silence, no whispers, no applause, just the heavy stillness of hearts that had been deeply moved. Then, as if released from a spell, the audience erupted. Cheers thundered, people rose to their feet, clapping and shouting his name. The sound was deafening, but Ethan only stood there, wide-eyed, his chest rising and falling as though he couldn't believe what he had just done. The judges rose with the crowd, their faces glowing with emotion. Heidi pressed a hand to her chest, Sophia wiped her eyes, and Simon simply nodded, a rare softness in his expression. Then, without hesitation, Heidi reached forward and slammed the golden buzzer. In an instant, golden confetti rained from above, shimmering in the stage lights like a waterfall of stars. Ethan dropped to his knees, covering his face as tears streamed down. For a boy who had spent so much of his life unseen, unloved, and unheard, this was more than applause, it was validation, a moment that told him he mattered. The audience chanted his name, their voices blending into one powerful wave of support. Ethan's small shoulders shook as he cried, not from sadness, but from a joy so overwhelming it felt unreal. The stage that once seemed too big for him now felt like home, wrapped in golden light and love he had never known before. The golden confetti continued to fall as Ethan knelt on the stage, his tears mixing with a smile that seemed to light up his whole face. The host rushed forward, pulling him into a warm embrace and whispering softly, "You're not alone anymore." Those words hit deeper than any applause, as if they had been waiting his whole life to be spoken. For the first time, Ethan felt the weight of loneliness lift from his small shoulders. The judges stood clapping, their eyes shining with pride, while the audience kept cheering, refusing to let the moment fade. Strangers in the crowd wiped their tears and smiled through them, as though they were part of something bigger than a talent show. Millions watching at home would soon feel the same, hearts touched by a boy who turned his pain into a song of hope. Ethan looked up into the golden rain, his hands trembling as he reached toward the falling confetti, almost as if he was catching pieces of a new beginning. The lights glowed brighter, and for the first time, he didn't see an orphan staring back at the world, he saw a dreamer, a fighter, someone finally seen and loved. In that moment, Ethan's voice had done more than win a golden buzzer. It had reminded everyone listening that no matter how broken or forgotten someone may feel, the right song, the right act of kindness, can lift them into a place where they finally belong.